What if the moment you lose it with your kids isn't parenting failure, but your greatest opportunity to teach them the most important skill they'll ever learn? What if your imperfect response to their meltdown becomes the very thing that shows them how to be human in a world that demands perfection? Last episode, we explored how conscious daily choices build the person who shows up in life's bigger moments. Today, we're diving into the ultimate test of that practice, parenting. There's no arena that reveals your relationship with control, grace, and authentic leadership quite like trying to raise tiny humans who are also adorable agents of chaos while staying human yourself. I'm Dr. Cara. Here's what I've discovered after decades of working with families and being a parent myself. We've been sold a myth about good parenting that's actually making both parents and children less resilient, less authentic, and more disconnected from themselves. The myth says good parents never lose their temper, always have the right response, and raise children who comply without struggle, who eat their kale without complaint, and never ever have a meltdown over the fundamental injustice of a blue cup when they really wanted a red one. This impossible standard creates what I call parenting debt, the accumulation of shame, exhaustion, and disconnection that comes from trying to be a perfect parent instead of a real one. You find yourself feeling like you're failing, and you go to bed wondering, how do I stop yelling at my kids? Or how can I be a more patient parent? You oscillate between being too permissive because you're afraid of damaging them and too controlling because you're afraid they'll never learn. Here's the truth. Your children don't need a perfect parent. They need a connected one. They don't learn emotional regulation from your lectures about it. They learn from watching you navigate your own emotions with grace and authenticity. Let me share a parenting moment that taught me more about grace than any book or training ever could. It was a Saturday morning and my daughter was about 8 years old. We planned a special day together, a trip to a museum that she had been excited about all week. However, as we were getting ready to leave, she suddenly announced, "I don't want to go anymore." My initial reaction was swift and completely reactive. My inner leadership development CEO took the stage ready to deliver a keynote on the importance of honoring Q3 commitments to an audience of one 8-year-old. I launched into a lecture about commitment, disappointment, and how we just don't change our minds when we feel like it. But then I saw her face crumple. And in that moment, I realized this had nothing to do with the museum. What she told me next completely blindsided me, and it changed how I parented. I stopped mid-sentence and used my own framework. Receive. I noticed her genuine distress, but I also noticed my own disappointment in the story I was telling myself about being a pushover parent. Perceive. I realized my reaction wasn't about teaching her commitment. It was about my discomfort with flexibility and my fear of not being a good enough parent. Respond. I took a breath and sat down beside her. "Tell me what's really going on," I said. What came out surprised me. She was worried about getting lost in the big museum. She was feeling overwhelmed by the crowds. She didn't have the emotional vocabulary to express social anxiety, so it came out as, "I don't want to go." We ended up going to a smaller, quieter nature center instead, not because I gave in to whining, but because I listened to what she was actually communicating and found a solution that honored both her needs and our plan to spend intentional time together. This experience illuminated how the receive, perceive, and respond methodology becomes essential. Connected parenting starts with managing your own internal state because children are constantly learning from your emotional regulation, not just your words about it. Receive in parenting means pausing before reacting. So when you're going to the grocery store and you're thinking, how do I handle this toddler tantrum without losing my own mind? That pause to receive is your first and most powerful tool. It means creating space to understand what is really happening before you respond. Perceive means examining your own triggers. Are you reacting to your child's behavior or to your fear of what other people think? Often what we perceive as defiance is just their way of expressing needs that they cannot yet articulate. Respond means taking action from awareness. Sometimes this means holding a firm boundary. Sometimes it means adjusting your approach. always, it means modeling the emotional regulation that you want them to develop. Let me paint a scenario that most parents face. Bedtime resistance. Your child is supposed to be asleep, but they keep getting up with requests for water, one more story, concerns about monsters, or sudden urgent questions about dinosaurs, or the meaning of the universe, or why their socks feel spicy. You know, the small stuff. The reactive approach accumulates parenting debt. But what if you applied connected parenting? Receive. You notice they're stalling, but also your own stress about the schedule. Perceive. You realize that behind the request might be a legitimate need for connection. You also perceive your own attachment to control around the routine. Respond. You might say, I can see you're having a hard time settling down. Bedtime can feel hard sometimes. I'm going to sit with you for 5 minutes and then it's time for sleep. Your response comes from an understanding which teaches your child that their feelings are valid even when the boundary is firm. Here's your practice for this week. Family reset moments. When things get heated, introduce the concept of a reset. Receive. Let's all take 3 deep breaths and notice what we're feeling. Perceive. I wonder what's really going on here. I'm feeling frustrated and you might be feeling upset. Respond. Now that we understand, what should we do? How can we solve this together? You might say, I just yelled and that wasn't how I wanted to handle this. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Let me try this again. This teaches your children that mistakes are normal and repair is always possible. We tend to either repeat our childhood patterns or swing to the opposite extreme. Connected parenting requires you to be aware of these patterns so you can respond to the child in front of you rather than the child you used to be. The most profound shift happens when your parenting decisions come from, what does my child need to learn about themselves and the world, rather than, what do I need to do to feel like I'm parenting correctly? When you parent from connection, your children develop genuine emotional regulation because they've watched you model it. They learn to trust their own inner wisdom because you've honored their emotional reality. Most importantly, you break generational patterns of shame-based parenting. You raise children who know they're loved as they are while still being encouraged to grow. Parenting is simply self-leadership in action while guiding someone else. In our next episode, we take this work into one of the most intimate arenas, our romantic partnerships. How do you navigate conflict without losing connection? How do you maintain who you are while building a life together? I'll be sharing the connected leadership breakthrough that absolutely transforms relationships. This week, try one family reset moment. The goal isn't perfection. In the spirit of embracing our humanity, I want you to do something brave. Share one imperfect parenting moment from this week in the comments below. Normalize this struggle and create a space that's 100% free of judgment and full of connection. Remember, your children don't need you to be a perfect parent. They need you to be a connected one. Connected parenting starts with leading yourself with grace.